Got borderline personality disorder, schizoaffective disorder.
You can watch. And then I go to the cell there.
Yeah, and you watch.
And then watch. Told the 27, you what the 27 is, there's a knife for you. You must kill.
A cyclical mood disorder, bipolar, antisocial personality disorder.
Just 2 hours outside of Denver, in the parched Rocky Mountain foothills, sits the highest security prison in America. Its official name is the U.S. Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, but everyone calls it the ADX. The ADX in Florence, Colorado, is the one and only federal super prison, home to the most dangerous and escape-prone inmates in federal lockup. Prisoners don't end up in the ADX by accident. Many have taken lives, either on the outside or in other prisons, including those of the guards. Others are hardcore gang members who have ordered or carried out prison hits, and a significant portion of the men housed at ADX, as many as a third by one estimate, have a diagnosed mental illness that makes them a serious threat to themselves and others. But critics of the ADX and other supermax prisons argue that regardless of these men's crimes or mental illnesses, the conditions inside these hyper-secure facilities, in which prisoners spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, are the very definition of cruel and unusual punishment. According to the United Nations, they even qualify as torture. Inside the facility. Completed in 1994, Florence ADMAX was designed to replicate the permanent lockdown model introduced in U.S. Penitentiary Marion after the slayings of correctional officers Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman. Today, it's known for its extreme use of sensory deprivation and isolating rehabilitation practices. A $60 million facility, the penitentiary was constructed to hold a capacity of 490 prisoners. However, it's never been completely full. As of 2021, there were 335 male inmates living in the facility. Those imprisoned in the Alcatraz of the Rockies are typically put on a 3-year program before reevaluating privileges and possibly being transferred to another location. Prisoners may be in solitary confinement for up to 23 hours a day, and cells are outfitted with a desk, stool, bed, and toilet made of poured concrete. For the other hour of each day, captives may enter an adjacent cell nicknamed the empty swimming pool. Here, a 4-inch by 4-inch skylight serves as the only window in the room, and prisoners have slightly more space to walk around. Over time, good behavior is rewarded with books, radios, and on rare occasions, black and white televisions. Most inmates won't see another person during their first 3 years behind bars in ADX. With hundreds of inmates serving life sentences in unimaginable living conditions, a total of 8 Florence ADMAX prisoners have taken their own lives. As the subject of multiple class action lawsuits and much media scrutiny, some of the treatment, or lack of proper treatment, that prisoners have received have been deemed inhumane. Despite its unparalleled security, there have also been 2 slayings reported in ADX Florence. While left without guard supervision in 2005, former Mexican mafia member Manuel Torres was brutally beaten to his demise by inmates Sylvester Rivera and Richard Santiago. In the same year, Gregory Joyner was slayed by James Duckett and Dominic Stewart. Life inside ADX Florence. At other prisons, inmates are placed in solitary confinement for short stints in response to violent or aggressive behavior. Corrections officials call this type of punitive solitary confinement administrative segregation, better known as the hole. At ADX, also known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, the entire prison is essentially the hole. ADX inmates are confined to their 7 by 12-foot cells 23 hours a day. They receive all their meals through a slot in the cell door, and their only glimpse of the outside world is through a thin slit of a window aimed at an empty sky. This deprives prisoners of learning the layout of the prison and the location of their cells. No one has ever escaped from ADX Florence. Since ADX inmates can't be trusted with anything that could be broken down and made into a weapon, all the cell furniture is solid concrete and immovable. A concrete writing desk, concrete chair, and a concrete slab topped with a thin foam pad that serves as a bed. The bathroom is a combination toilet sink and a shower that turns on automatically 3 times a week. The only time that inmates are allowed out of their cells is for an hour of exercise. Handcuffed and shackled at their feet, inmates are either led to an empty room with a single pull-up bar or taken outside to the yard, where they are locked alone inside a caged pen. Robert Hood, a former warden at the ADX, has said that ADX is not designed for humanity. When it's 23 hours a day in a room with a slit of a window where you can't even see the Rocky Mountains, let's be candid here, it's not designed for rehabilitation, period, end of story. In another interview, Hood described the eerie quiet of walking through a modern prison facility where all of the inmates are locked down. The ADX is a far more stark environment than any other prison I've ever seen, and I've been to all of the federal prisons, says Hood, further adding, I call it a clean version of hell. A barred hell. For ADX prisoners, their only regular contact with other human beings are the brief interactions with guards who bring them meals and escort them to the yard. A 2014 report by Amnesty International found that ADX prisoners routinely go days with only a few words spoken to them. The effects of long-term solitary confinement range from depression and anxiety to full-on hallucinations and psychotic breaks. This reminds us of the story of an ADX inmate named Jack Powers, jailed for robbery and sent to ADX after escaping from another prison. The isolation sent Powers spiraling into insanity. He cut off his earlobes, chewed through a finger, and smashed his head open in order to inject his brain with bacteria-laden fluid. It's just the harshest place you've ever seen. Nothing living, not so much as a blade of grass anywhere, said Travis Dusenberry in an interview with the Marshall Project. He spent 10 years at ADX for attacking a guard at another prison before being released. It's so claustrophobic in there, it got to the point where absolutely anything that changed, like if I saw snow falling outside, was what allowed me to survive, he says. ADX has 6 different levels of security, and inmates can move from restrictive to less restrictive housing and possibly to other prisons. But even when released from solitary, the effects of isolation linger. In 1993, a doctor named Stuart Gracian described a condition called SHU syndrome that's characterized by paranoia, panic attacks, aggression, and psychotic symptoms. Why is it called the Alcatraz of the Rockies? In reference to San Francisco's most notorious island prison, Florence ADMAX is the only facility that can claim to be as secure as the shark-filled choppy waters of the Pacific Ocean. Today, ADX Florence can be referred to as either a super maximum or an administrative maximum security prison. So how secure is Supermax? Well, if you're stopping in Florence's historic district for a bite to eat, we can assure you that America's most dangerous captives will remain safely behind bars. The facility is surrounded by 12-foot razor wire fencing, and its 1,400 steel doors, motion detectors, and cameras are all remote controlled. On-site, there is a high guard-to-prisoner ratio, and many additional security measures are taken outside of the control unit. Beyond the fences of ADX Florence, the area is filled with watchtowers, sharpshooters, pressure pads, laser beams, and guard dogs ready to stop any Prion brave enough to attempt an escape. You may have heard that Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the notorious drug kingpin, was sent to ADX after escaping twice from maximum security prisons in Mexico. But he's not the only infamous person sent there. Let's take a look at some others. The infamous Terry L. Nichols, domestic terrorist, Oklahoma City bomber, serving 161 consecutive life sentences. Terry L. Nichols met Timothy J. McVeigh while the pair were serving in the U.S. Army in the late 80s. They both became vehement anti-government conspiracy theorists, studying bomb-making together at gun shows, and in 1995, the pair conspired to destroy the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. Their bombs ultimately slayed 168 people, including 19 young children and babies. Nichols received 161 consecutive life sentences for his role in the bombing. McVeigh, who was ostensibly the mastermind behind the Oklahoma City bombing, was executed by lethal injection at USP Terre Haute in 2001. Robert P. Hansen, Soviet spy, serving 15 consecutive life sentences. Robert P. Hansen was an FBI agent for 25 years. During that time, he sold thousands of classified documents to Soviet and Russian intelligence, pocketing at least $1.4 million by the time he was caught in 2001. Hansen pled guilty to 14 counts of espionage and one of conspiracy to commit espionage, and was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms. Ramzi Ahmed Youssef, one of the 1993 World Trade Center bombers, serving life plus 240 years. On February 26, 1993, a 1,300-pound nitrate hydrogen gas bomb was detonated in the parking garage of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in downtown New York, slaying 6 people and injuring thousands. Youssef escaped to Pakistan after the attack and wasn't apprehended until 1995, when he was sentenced to life plus 240 years and told the courts he was proud of his identity as a terrorist. Richard Lee McNair, master escapist, serving life but could be transferred to state prison. This Oklahoma man was convicted of slaying, attempted slaying, and burglary, for which he received 2 life sentences. But that's not what would put him in ADX. It was McNair's 3 successful escapes that would land him in semi-permanent solitary confinement. The first was in 1988, where he used lip balm as a lubricant to shimmy off his handcuffs while he was being held for questioning in a North Dakota county jail. An elaborate chase ensued, and he was caught, but that hardly deterred McNair. He escaped the North Dakota State Penitentiary again in 1992 and 2006, when he mailed himself out of prison and lived successfully on the outside until he was captured in 2007. The authorities then figured it was time to level up, quite literally. Michael Swango, serial slayer, serving 3 consecutive life terms. Michael Swango was a physician who spent most of the 1980s and 90s using his medical license to poison patients, and sometimes colleagues. Despite thoroughly creeping out plenty of people by the time he earned his degree from Southern Illinois University School of Medicine, including being caught faking checkups during OB/GYN rotations, Swango secured an internship at what was then known as the Ohio State University Medical Center in 1983. This is where his prolific career as a serial slayer would purportedly begin. It is believed that Swango took the lives of more than 60 people, often by poisoning them with arsenic or intentionally overdosing them with something they were prescribed, though he could only be charged with 4 homicides. Swango was sentenced to life in prison in 2000. Dzhokhar 8 Tsarnaev, terrorist aka the Boston Bomber, life in prison. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and Tamerlan Tsarnaev, 2 brothers of Chechen descent, were raised in Kyrgyzstan before immigrating to Cambridge in the 1990s. The brothers were radicalized by Al-Qaeda and built 2 pressure cooker bombs that they planted at the 2013 Boston Marathon. The explosion claimed the lives of 3 people and injured more than 250 others. Dzhokhar and Tamerlan, 19 and 26 years old at the time, first evaded capture and 3 days later slayed Massachusetts Institute of Technology police officer Sean Collier while trying to steal his gun. Tamerlan was shot by police in a chaotic and violent chase less than 24 hours later. During his 2015 trial, Dzhokhar was found guilty of 30 charges, including using a weapon of mass destruction, and was sentenced to the gallows by lethal injection. In July 2020, a court overturned Dzhokhar's sentence. That's all for this video, folks. See you another time.